Good afternoon. I'm Howard Husick, Vice President for Policy Research at the Manhattan Institute. Thanks so much for joining us. The question of whether and how government, particularly the federal government, directs tax dollars to specific industries was a discussion in last night's presidential debate, and it's become an important and ongoing theme in the current presidential campaign. The terms on which Washington assisted the finance and auto industries have also been the focus of intense debate. But probably the most contentious example of all is the one on which Diana Furchtgott-Roth, Manhattan Institute's senior fellow and our speaker this afternoon, focuses in her timely and important new book, Regulating to Disaster: How Green Jobs Policies Are Damaging America's Economy. In it, she subjects the assumptions and policies which led to such ill-fated federal investments as that of the now bankrupt Solyndra solar panel manufacturer, as well as the A123 electric car battery manufacturer, to a withering analysis which we at the Institute have come to expect from this Oxford-trained economist who served as Chief of Staff for the Council of Economic Advisors during the administration of President George W. Bush. In her book, she adeptly helps us understand why the failures of such direct investments in private firms are both significant problems in themselves and cautionary tales for those who would have the government, rather than private investors, allocate capital. The publication of Regulating to Disaster caps Diana's first year as an Institute Senior Fellow, a year in which she has been prolific and influential, cited by writers, reporters, talk show hosts across the country. I think in particular of her many, many contributions to our series called Issues 2012, ranging from her analysis demonstrating that even adjusting for the state of the economy, the number of Americans receiving food stamps is at an all-time high, and we've heard that echoed in the campaign, to another in which she made clear that oil companies, so vilified by some politicians, are not monopolies controlled by a few wealthy industrialists, but rather an important source of wealth and income for millions of average Americans. Whether it's on Real Clear Markets, in the Washington Examiner, tax notes, or testifying before Congress, as she is frequently asked to do, Diana is a powerful and effective voice in economic policy debates, and as I know you'll agree after her talk this afternoon. Diana Furchtgott-Roth holds degrees in economics both from Swarthmore College and Oxford University. In addition to her position for President George W. Bush, she served as well on the staff of the Domestic Policy Council for President George H.W. Bush and as a staff economist for the Council of Economic Advisors during the Reagan administration. From 2003 to 2005, Ms. Furchtgott-Roth was chief economist of the U.S. Department of Labor. She's also the author, this past July, of Women's Figures, a guide to the economic progress of women in America. Please join me in welcoming Senior Fellow Diana Furchtgott-Roth.
Thank you very much, Howard, for that very kind introduction. And thank all of you for coming. I'm really grateful that you could be doing so many other things today than coming to listen to me, but here you are listening to me talk about green jobs and the fallacies of green jobs. I'd like to thank the Manhattan Institute not only for supporting this research, but for organizing this talk. And I'd also like to thank John Phillip, a mechanical engineer who has built power plants all over the world, who is here and who advised me on the technical aspects of energy in the book and who read the whole manuscript to check on the scientific details of it. Well, this is an appropriate day for talking about regulating to disaster because last night President Obama promised once more to develop the energy sources of the future. Now, when any administration, Republican or Democrat, decides to develop energy projects, taxpayers had better watch out. Governments get in the business of picking winners and losers, which leads to cronyism and wasted taxpayer dollars. This is the question of industrial policy. whether government should support business ventures in new technologies that are unable to secure private funding. Government appears to be worse at this than private markets from the records that we have over the past 5 years. In contrast, in a speech in California in May, Mitt Romney said, quote, "The president doesn't understand when you invest like that in one solar energy company, it makes it harder for solar technology generally because the scores of other entrepreneurs in the solar field suddenly lost their opportunity to get capital. Who wants to put money into a solar company when the government puts $500 million into one of its choice?" Excellent question. And I wrote this book because we're not just spending $500 million, we're spending about $12 billion a year to make electricity more expensive rather than cheaper. That's about $6 billion in tax breaks and about $6 billion in direct expenditures. We're pursuing a vision of green jobs that makes no sense and that hurts low-income Americans. We brainwash our children to think that green is good and think uncritically about green products and green jobs. And yet we can't even define what a green job is. Let's start with green jobs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has 5 definitions of the 3.1 million green jobs that it's counted, namely energy from renewable sources, energy efficiency, energy pollution reduction and removal, natural resource conservation, and environmental compliance, education, and training and public awareness. When I was testifying on Capitol Hill before the House Energy and Commerce Committee, they had a paper cup in front of me. Often they just have a bottle of water, but this time they had a bottle of water and a paper cup. And the paper cup said, "Architect of the Capitol" on one side, and "Power to Save Energy" on the other side. So since this cup fit the definition of education, training, and public awareness, the workers who made it had green jobs. If the cup had just said "Architect of the Capitol," or if it had just been a plain white cup, then the people who made it would not have had green jobs. And when I wrote this book, Regulating to Disaster, about environmental issues, while I was doing it, I had a green job. And perhaps I still do right now because I'm talking about it. But if I'd been writing about Social Security, and actually at the same time I was writing my book, Women's Figures, an illustrated guide to the economic progress of women in America, if I'd just been working on that, I would not have had a green job. Plumbers, if they install regular toilets, they don't have green jobs. If they install low-flow toilets, they have green jobs. Farmers, if they grow corn for ethanol, they have a green job. If they grow corn for ethanol and corn for people to eat, they have a green job. If they just grow corn for people to eat, even though they're farmers, they don't have green jobs. Salvation Army workers, if they recycle used clothing, then they have green jobs too. Well, there are 4,665 people who produce renewable energy in utility companies, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics' latest report, which came out in April. They are clearly green, but you have to ask, are they making energy more expensive or are they making it less expensive? Well, it's clear that they are making energy more expensive. The average levelized cost for power plants entering service in 2017, according to the Department of Energy, if they're fueled by natural gas, this costs $66 per megawatt hour. For wind, $96 per megawatt hour. For solar power, $153 per megawatt hour. Well, 5 years ago, in 2007, when the Energy Loan Guarantee Program was put in place and many of these subsidies for solar and wind, we didn't know that we were sitting on 200 years of inexpensive natural gas. So maybe it was logical for people then to think we need to be independent or as independent as we can be of the Middle East. In fact, the first president who coined the phrase energy independence was Richard Nixon, a Republican. So maybe